Just 2 Sundays from now, the church will celebrate the beginning of the new liturgical year with the Advent season. And we have already been listening to the Advent theme about the second coming of Christ. Last week, for example, the story of the 10 bridesmaids reminded us that we need to be prepared for the arrival of the bridegroom Jesus. Today's second reading reminds us that of the day of the Lord, when he will come when we least expect it, just like the earthquakes in Mineral. And today's first reading suggests that we should be diligent and industrious, like the loyal and faithful wife, as opposed to the lazy servant who received only one talent and did nothing with it. The gospel reading goes even further, describing how we should be anticipating and preparing ourselves for the return of the Master. And Jesus explains this very well in the parable of the talents. Here we see a landowner entrusting his property to 3 of his servants while he's away. He entrusts one servant with 5 talents, another with 2, and a third servant with only 1 talent. Now, in the time of Jesus, a talent was a lot of money. And the parable goes on to say that the one who received 5 talents traded what he had and earned 5 more talents. The servant with 2 also invested and doubled his capital. But the third one, who received only 1 talent, the gospel says, went off and dug a hole in the ground and buried his master's money. Then the master returns and called his servants to account. And he was very pleased with the first 2 servants because they had invested their talents and done well. And because of their loyalty and willingness to take risks, they were entrusted with even more. He was not pleased at all with the third one who did not invest his talent and produce absolutely nothing. To him, the little he had was taken away, and he was expelled from his master's property. William Barclay, a world-renowned New Testament professor at Glasgow University in Scotland, makes 4 useful points about this parable. And the first point is that God gives each one of us different gifts. But it doesn't matter how many gifts or talents a person has. What it really matters is how that person uses them. And I don't think that God would demand from any of us things that would require certain abilities and talents that we do not have. I'm comfortable working with prisoners, ministering to them, many who have committed really big crimes. And I'm okay with assisting Father Duffy with baptisms and weddings and funerals, but don't ask me to join the choir because I cannot carry a tune. Now, what God expects from us is that we use to the fullest the abilities and talents that we possess. And let's face it, people are not equal in talents. Some have more, some have less. What this parable is telling us is that whatever talents we have, we must use them for ministering in the service of God. God gave us talents. We, in turn, must invest in them and offer them back to God with interest. There's a saying that goes like this: what I am is God's gift to me. What I do is my gift to God. Another lesson is that the reward of work well done is more work. The 2 servants who did well were not told to sit back, relax, and enjoy. They were given greater tasks and more responsibilities in the service of their master. Our attitude here is very important. We should always respond positively and with a sense of urgency to the gift the Lord has given us, because these gifts are really opportunities to serve the Lord. We should not stop at 1 or 2 and say that we have done our part. Serving God and His people is a never-ending process. The next point has to do with a statement that is difficult to understand and accept. Those who have will get more until they go rich, while those who have not will lose the little they have. Now, what does this mean? At first glance, it sounds very unfair. Unfortunately, from a world's perspective, this has become a reality of life in today's economy. The poor gets poorer, the rich gets richer. But this is not the point in the parable. What this statement means for us is that if a person has a gift or a talent and puts it into practice, that person will progressively be able to do more with it. But if that person has a gift and fails to invest in it, that person will eventually lose it. And let's look at this from a practical perspective. Take any kind of sport, for example, basketball, golf, even exercising. If we stop practicing any of these things, we will eventually become less efficient in these sports, or our physical fitness will degrade, and so on. Well, it is the same thing with the talents that God has given us. Jesus is telling us today that those who share generously the gifts they have been given are likely to find themselves constantly enriched and fulfilled. And those who not will eventually be deprived of God's generous gifts. And there's one more lesson at the end of the parable, and that has to do with the consequences of not doing anything, not using our gifts or talents. The servant with one talent did not lose it. He simply did nothing with it. Even if he would have taken the chance and done something with it and lose it, that would still have been much better than doing nothing at all. There's a tendency for a person with only one talent to say, "Oh, I have so small a talent and I can do so little with it. It is not worthwhile to even try because of the little contribution I would make anyway." You know, we're basically all good people. Our problem is not so much sinning in thought, word, and action. Probably our most common sin has to do with the things we have failed to do. Maybe we didn't take the time to give words of encouragement to someone because we didn't have the time. Or maybe we didn't defend our faith when challenged. Or maybe we did not get involved because we didn't want to complicate our lives. Today we see in this parable a landowner entrusting his wealth to 3 of his servants. They are not given the same amount, and this implies that they have different abilities and talents. It is also implied that different returns are expected from different gifts. And the idea here should not be competing against each other, but competing against ourselves. And it is great that Joe Blow has wonderful gifts and talents. I have my own, and it is my job to deal with them and make it happen. So today we're called to think about what particular gifts and talents God has given me. Some people are clearly gifted, but there's no one, absolutely no one, who can say that they have been gifted with nothing. So we must then ask ourselves, how are we going to use our particular talents and gifts in the service of God and neighbor? And if we were to die today, and Jesus would ask us, how did you use the gift and talents I gave you? What would we be able to say in reply?